Okay, you're very welcome back. So we are talking GAA. Very happy to bring in Malachy Clerkin of the Irish Times. Hey, Mal.
Hello, Joe.
And Jason Sherlock, All-Ireland winner with Dublin as both the player and the coach. Jason, great to have you on. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks, Joe.
So look, hopefully an interesting conversation because innovations are ongoing in the game and the sweeper keeper has now very much evolved into the fly keeper. Honourable mention to Shane Curran, but I think in Rory Beggan of Monaghan and Niall Morgan of Tyrone we are seeing the proper establishment of this new frontier. A scourge on the game, Malachy Clerkin.
Yeah. You got somebody from Monaghan on to talk about it. Scourge in the game. I don't know that it's a scourge in the game at all, really. I think it's interesting when done right, but of course, when done wrong, Rory Beggan gets what he got on Sunday, which I would suggest that there might have been quite a few Monaghan people at least going, well, that's overdue now. That'll knock the edges off him a little bit and make him think a bit more about blindly going up pitch. But it's a really interesting development. Where it goes is really interesting to tease out.
Yeah, well, let's hopefully try and do that now. For people who didn't see what happened at the weekend, this was Monaghan against Kerry, and there was around midfield a very square pass to Beggan, which was intercepted by Sean O'Shea. Not much pace on the pass. Terrible pass, really, on every front. And David Clifford scored into an empty net, and Beggan obviously was sprinting back frantically to no avail. That said, there have been numerous examples of it kind of working to reasonable effect, not least against Tyrone this year. There was a score in the 50th minute. I was just watching it back when it was 7 points apiece, and he came up the wing and there was a big switch of play and he put it over. So this is the balancing act. Jason, it's great to have you on. I'm sure you've given this a lot of thought. So what do you make of this innovation in broad strokes?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Like the role of the goalkeeper, like it's not so long ago where the perception of the goalkeeper was you put in probably the least talented player that will stand in goal, and maybe if he has a pair of goalkeeping gloves, even better. But like even in my own time as a player, I go back to we played Kerry and Thurles. The infamous, from a Dublin perspective, Maurice Fitz point from the sideline in the first game. We had a 45 towards the end of that game. It was against the breeze, and I think Wayne McCarthy took it. It dropped short, and I remember being on the bus after it, whether I think was talking to some players about why didn't we bring up our goalie? Like Davy Burney had the hobnail boots on. Surely he would have been able to kick it 45 yards, and it hadn't been thought about. And then you move into the noughties when you had Stephen Cluxton as a free taker, obviously a great free taker, and then from a kick out for perspective, when you had your own kick outs, he created a fine art of how to retain possession. And now I suppose you're moving into other areas. So even in Stephen's time, in terms of how a goalkeeper can affect your defensive organisation, can he release a defender to do another role? And also then actually the kick out against. We've seen examples of keepers moving up to to assist with the kick out against strategy. And then the one you mentioned there about particularly Rory Beggan in terms of that offensive organisation, how can he help offensively? I think when you look at most team sports, I suppose you're looking to create one-on-ones, you're looking to create overlaps, you're trying to get space somewhere. So I suppose it's interesting to see the level of thought that's going in now to see, can a goalkeeper assist with those strategies? And certainly now there's probably no more influential player on a team than the goalkeeper.
Yeah. So I think with any number of those things, say for instance the evolution of the kick out and keeping possession, partaking in play, I suppose even within 15-20 metres of your own goal, all of that stuff, I think at a glance that all kind of made sense. And we see it in other sports, if you want to use soccer as an analogy, and how goalkeepers use their feet there. Where this current crop have maybe departed is that they're pushing right up. They're going past halfway and they're doing it routinely. So what's your opinion of that, Jason?
Well, I suppose I'd start, and it's important we challenge either the traditionalist view that we have of watching GAA, and I suppose the things we take as givens. And if you start with a simple question of when does a goalkeeper need to be in the goal? Like really the only time he needs to be there is to try and save a shot at goal. and obviously maybe to go out and kick a ball out. So I suppose there's a lot of time where he doesn't need to be in the goal, and can he add value in all the other aspects of play at various times? I suppose that's the first question you have to ask. And again, there are great examples of how goalkeepers have positively impacted the game, and you can see that in terms of how teams are preparing, how teams are thinking about their goalkeeper. And you go back to particularly the sevens, and I would have watched the Kilmacud Sevens. I played in the Kilmacud Sevens, and you see this goalkeeper running up and getting on the ball, and I remember kind of thinking, that's wrong, how could he be doing that? But I suppose that's because I had a traditional way of viewing the game, and like I would admire and I would give a lot of credit to these teams that are trying different things. And this has gone back even before the guys at the moment. I know like Armagh, Cavan had tried it with a former outfield player. We played against Laois teams where Briody loved to go up the pitch. So it's trying to create that added value, try to create a reward for your team. I suppose the other side of that is there's an element of risk. And I suppose how can you safeguard against anything going wrong? And then as a coach on the opposition, how can you really create risk and create chaos for a goalkeeper if they do want to get involved in the play?
Mal, where are you in it?
I mean, clearly I would have been keeping a fairly close eye on Monaghan in particular over the last few years. And, I interviewed Rory Beggan, I would say 2018 possibly, where he talked almost starry-eyed at the idea of someday scoring an outfield point in intercounty football, that he had done so for Scottstown, and that, it'll happen, I'll score a point for Monaghan one day. And you're kind of going, right, fine. Like, that's, like, Colin Keyes had an interesting piece today in the Indo about this, where he made a point that I hadn't thought of, that if your goalkeeper comes out and let's say he covers something like 5-6K in a match, that's 5 or 6 kilometers of running that his defenders don't have to do, and therefore can feed into them conserving energy in games that, added time makes games goes to fully 80 minutes. So there is that element of it. I do think that where it can fall down in some cases is, like, Ethan Rafferty played in goal for Armagh on Sunday. Ethan Rafferty is an outfield player. He made a couple of incursions where he came bursting off the shoulder of an Armagh defender or an Armagh midfielder and really added pace to the attack and drew defenders to him, drew a couple of Mayo lads to him, and he set up a point near the end for young Nugent, I think it was. And like that, to me, is a fantastic example of where this can work. When you have a guy coming at speed who none of the opposition have responsibility to keep tabs on. It's not like a cornerback coming steaming up and the corner forward having to chase him. Like, Ethan Rafferty was nobody's responsibility there. Therefore, he was able to create this overlap, and he has the footballing talent to dodge around a tackle and play an excellent left-footed pass out to the wing to a man in space who then scores the point. Okay, there. Absolutely. That's top class. Like, that's a real innovation in the game. The point you mentioned earlier that Rory Beggan scored against Tyrone, again, in a game that was, and like that Monaghan-Tyrone game in Omagh that night was in the worst of the weather. It was two teams matching up, digging a trench at either end of the pitch, a real Ulster football game. The whole play had pulled over to one side of the pitch, and Beggan made this run into complete space, into 50 yards of space. Again, absolutely, that works.
Yeah.
But my problem with it, if there is a problem, is that Ethan Rafferty is a really talented outfield intercounty footballer. Rory Beggan is not. Rory Beggan is a really top-class goalkeeper, an all-star goalkeeper, but when it comes down to like Jason was saying earlier, your goalkeeper is traditionally the guy who isn't good enough to play outfield. Rory Beggan is not, let's be very honest about this, a good enough footballer to play outfield. And if you saw the goal that he got caught on the other day, you mentioned, Joe, yeah, it was a terrible pass to him. And yes, it was. It wasn't a good enough pass. But an outfield player notices that pass is under hit, gets his body weight ahead of it, notices that a tackle is coming in, and secures that ball. Rory was back on his heels because, look, he is not an outfield player. And that is my problem with him specifically, and sometimes with the goalkeepers who come out. If you're coming out and you're good enough to play as an outfield player and to add value, as Jason says, as an outfield player, absolutely fine, because then you have the head for it, then you know when to do it. But if you're just out there as an extra body, taking a pass that anybody else could take, and you're not good enough to evade tackles, you're not good enough to secure possession, then I don't know. Then I think you need to rethink it. You need to pick and choose your moments better.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, to be honest. Like, Jason, let's throw a few things around. So I totally accept Malachy's point about an Ethan Rafferty coming out on the overlap at a bit of pace and helping a side beat the press. And then maybe at a certain point when we're up and running, getting back into position. Like Beggan at the weekend, it's completely static. Like, he's not serving any real purpose, just hovering around there. And it's hard to see what he's offering that any other player on the pitch couldn't offer and better. And then also, even you think to the Ulster final last year, there were times where, for instance, Niall Morgan is having a foray up the field, and that's okay and everything, and he's on the ball. But like, watching the game, Peter Hart was like covering the goal. Now, I'd sooner Peter Hart be on the ball further up the pitch than Niall Morgan. Like, it was just innovation for the sake of innovation, I thought, and I was kind of looking at it going, I think we're very eager to celebrate innovations in the game, and so no one wants to be accused of living in the past. But I did think, I'd swap Peter Hart there for Morgan all day long. So are you seeing it being done in the right way often enough, maybe, is the best way of putting this question to you?
Well, I think if you go a step back, why are goalkeepers contributing to the offensive play? It's because teams have defensively set up in a certain way. And again, that was a challenge that we faced over a number of years about the defensive structure and teams dropping bodies back. So it lends, or it allows people time to kind of dwell on the ball outside, and I think that's where it stemmed from, because the game isn't going with pace. So I suppose, having someone that is adept on the ball, that has the tools to obviously receive a ball and pass the ball, is really important in that play. And ultimately, it's an additional player. In that instance, in theory, if the opposition have a goalkeeper in goal, they've only 14 outfield players. So it's 16 v 14. So in theory, you have a two-man power play. Yeah. So I suppose that's why you would do it. I suppose, you guys have talked into what are the challenges with it. But again, that's just one element of the play. Like having the ball is one element. I think what's really interesting, and it's probably my favourite part of the game at the moment, are kickouts. And not only, as we mentioned about Stephen creating a fine art in retaining possession, kickouts against now, like try to make a goalkeeper kick contested kickouts. It's a really fascinating part of the play. And I think even from a viewer, and that's something that it really bugs me, this whole traditional thing of showing a replay of a score and then it comes back to the game and the ball is already halfway down the pitch. You lose so much in terms of what's going on from a strategy point of view nowadays. When the ball goes dead, you can see the intention of a team. How hungry are they to win the ball back on first possession? And alternatively, then you can see what the strategy is. Are they going short? Are they going long? And I think something that helps that, as well as that, behind the camera, behind the goal view, it's almost like a chessboard where you can see those pieces.
Okay, I'm going to come back to the Beggan thing there and these lads coming up the pitch, because I'm still not convinced, right? I'll come back to that in a second. But seeing as you raised the kickouts, there was something I was itching to ask you about. Look, I've seen this work to good effect, I think, at the drawn final against Kerry and Cluxton stepping up. One of the great examples of a team really using their goalkeeper in a smart way. The game in Tralee, instead of getting a replay on a couple of shots, we did get the end-to-end view, and we saw Evan Comerford coming up, I would say, to almost halfway, and he was pretty much just filling space. He wasn't marking anyone. It struck me that he was there as some kind of a deterrent, as in, I'm here, I'm free. If you kick it to this area of the pitch, then I will win the ball. And I was thinking, geez, I would kick it at him. And I would be sending a big lad over there right on top of him. And I mean, I don't see a good outcome for Comerford in that situation. He either loses the ball and it's panic stations. Does he tackle the man who's just won the ball, or does he sprint back to his goal straight away? Or he wins the ball maybe, and then I don't know if I back Evan Comerford under massive pressure to not foul the ball or be turned over or something to go awry. So I was thinking that day, geez, give Evan Comerford everything he wants and plenty more of it. I didn't see the win of that for Comerford. I couldn't envisage the situation where that would work if you started sending a David Moran over on top of him and launch the ball at him.
Yeah, no, and it's a great kind of observation, and I suppose starting with trying to win possession back, you're trying to create a contested kick out. So like the I suppose what the friend of a goalkeeper is space. They want to see loads of space that they can kick the ball to, and as an opposition, your first challenge is to give the perception that there's nowhere to kick the ball. And again, in this day and age, in terms of preparation of opposition, like there'll be heat maps of where goalkeepers like to kick the ball, where their sweet spot is. Yeah. So again, as an opposition, your starting point is how can you challenge that goalkeeper?
And so sorry to interrupt. Totally agree, right? And that's what Comerford's doing. I am now saying, I want you to bomb it on Comerford and David Moran. When the ball's in the air, you sprint at him, and then let's watch all hell break loose. Like, I don't think it's that much of an illusion of there's no space out here. If anything, they've no goalkeeper because he's in this particular spot. Like, it's even better than space. I mean, if I could somehow entice Comerford to stand there every time, I would.
Yeah, and you should be coaching, Joe, because that's the next step. And like with every action, there's a reaction, and it's about the teams. And we would have done this in our preparation. It's about the teams that create the bigger risk. And you've identified one there. Like if a goalkeeper is out at the halfway line, what would happen if you put the ball on top of him? Another example of that, I think it was in the Monaghan and Tyrone game, when Morgan went to the halfway line. The Monaghan full forward, what did he do? The ball was, traditionally he runs back into the edge of the square with his man. But again, if you adapt, if the Monaghan full forward had said to himself, wait a minute, I'm going to stand out over on the sideline and I'm going to bring my full back with me, what happens then? And again, that's, I suppose, the next development of all these tactics, that if a goalkeeper is going to be deployed in the play, whether it's offensively or defensively, how can you come up with ways to really counteract that and create opportunities for your team?
In a line, would you push for a goalkeeper to go and mark space on the halfway line?
It depends on the goalkeeper. I think you're right.
Say Evan Comerford, for instance.
Well, it might need to be Evan. It might, like, Evan could release another player to go up. And again, it depends on the situation, and for teams, a game can be chaotic. You could be 5 points up, 5 points down. I go back to, I think it was Kerry one year where they flooded up on our goal kick out, and it was great. It was a real challenge for Stephen to try to get the ball out. And then I think as the game went on, Stephen figured out how we get the ball out. Going back to a Tyrone game where they'd set out their stall with the kick out, and again we counteracted that very quickly and they lost all confidence. So it's just trying to figure out what works for you. And again, I appreciate that Rory Beggin's going to come in for a lot of criticism after last weekend, but he's done so much positively for Monaghan's offence in the past, and it's not about not doing it, it's about doing things a bit better the next time Rory is involved with the play.
I suppose the other aspect of all this, Mal, is if you go back to the Shane Curran days, what this tactic had, in a sense, was the element of surprise. That is the great thing. Oh my God, the keeper's out and there's an overlap, and we haven't even talked about this as a team. What do we do? Whereas now, obviously, coaches like Jason are sitting around planning for Beggin. That's where this is going to get very interesting now, and where it's really going to be road tested.
Yeah, you also had the element with Shane of people kind of dismissing it because Shane's a bit mad, and sure, like that's just lunatic stuff. Whereas, like now it is absolutely is absolutely a key part of the game. And like it's a key part of the way Monaghan play. Like this isn't going to end Rory Beggan coming up the pitch. They're going to have to try and work it out better. Look, they were very static the other day all over the pitch. Whether it was just it wasn't just Rory Beggan kind of standing, trying to fill space. Like it was very static performance all around the way. I think you're right. I think, Joe, not to denigrate your football knowledge, but if you can sit and watch games and say you should bomb the ball down on Evan Comerford, the rest of the teams are definitely thinking that, and I would suggest that the only reason they haven't done it is that they're going to wait until the summer to do it.
Well, I noticed after Tralee he wasn't coming up the same way.
He was against Mayo, though.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he did in the Mayo game, because funny enough,
would you not be sending Aidan O'Shea his way and saying, I mean, what's the best outcome here for you?
I would, but I would be doing it in the All-Ireland semi-final.
Fair enough.
Rather than in a league game that they're already winning.
No, that's fair enough.
I think you're right. Like the sort of thrust and parry of it all, the teams all trying to outwit each other, and especially now that the playing field is quite level at the moment. There is. It is up for grabs now in a way that sort of 3-4 years ago, when Dublin were such innovators, when Jason was involved, I don't know how motivated loads of teams were to do anything other than just park the bus against the Dubs and hope for the best, But now it's a very level championship, and there's going to be so much innovation.
Jason, totally accept your point about goalkeepers helping teams play out from the back and beat that initial press. And as we're saying here, Beggan's taking it a step further. Say you're back in coaching, and say you're planning to play Monaghan, and you're envisaging these, 10, 15, 20 times a match where Beggan is going to come up to halfway and beyond as part of general build-up. What's your plan for him there? Are you assigning someone to mark him? Are you leaving him as a free man? Can you give us what you think would be the most effective way to make Beggan's life very, very difficult?
Yeah, well, I think that's the starting point, is how you can create chaos. How can you make an opposition keeper think about what he's doing? And you both have picked up on a really good point there in terms of preparation. Like you say, surely such and such should have gone over there. You have to prepare for that scenario. And if you're not ready for that scenario, sometimes it can take you off guard. And I think the biggest thing you could do as a team is have the opposition thinking about loads of scenarios. And that the more time they're thinking about you, the less time they have to prepare for themselves. And again, that's the value of having a goalkeeper that could potentially contribute in other parts of the game. So then specifically to your question, again, it depends on your own structure, because nowadays you have teams that will play a sweeper or two sweepers. So you're not necessarily man marking, but you have to create chaos. You have to implement some sort of doubt or fear into a goalkeeper in that situation's mind, that if I lose the ball, I'm in trouble here. And I suppose that would be the fun part. And we had that. We like, as I said, it was a Graham Briotti played for Laois, and he was a great ball player, but we did feel that he would go the full length of the pitch at certain times. So if you were going to turn him over, would you rather do it near his goal or away from his goal? And I suppose as a coach and as a team, you have to figure out what creates the best opportunity for you and creates the biggest risk for the goalie.
So would you entice him further up the field or no?
Potentially.
I think, like, in fairness to Rory, I think he's been really solid. I know one example is very unfair with him, but when I've seen him, I've never seen panic. And that's probably, he's always been very composed. And I think ultimately he is there to supply. He's not there to try and shoot the lights out. He's trying to supply his team. So again, you have to respect that. He's very capable. Whereas you will have other goalkeepers and Mal mentioned, the Armagh goalie, where he's trying to inject pace, and he's a footballer as such. So you might have to counteract that a different way. But ultimately, I think as a viewer, we all like to see a bit of chaos, and if the ball breaks down, what's going to happen? Because it's not as easy as just kicking the ball 70 yards like in soccer. I think that's one thing we're not factoring in here.
Yeah.
This is league football. It's winter football. Like, you're playing against the gale. So to actually get the ball and transition the ball, it's very hard, and it's probably not going to happen as much in Croke Park during the summer. But at the same time, it's very entertaining for us at the moment.
Yeah, it's great. One last one then, as a coach. So you couldn't ask David Clarke of Mayo to do what Beggan is doing. Skill sets are different. Do you see the game, Jason, heading to a point where, say, in the next 5 to 10 years, Beggan ignores all the criticism and there's going to be the odd mistake, but makes this a fairly accepted thing? Do you think it'll become so accepted that in 5 to 10 years, inter-county coaches will be saying, my goalkeeper has to have the outfield skills to come up and take a score and contribute almost as much and as well as an outfield player? Do you think that will become the majority thing, say, amongst 20 teams, for instance, 25 teams? Is that where the game is going, or will there be still room for David Clarkes in the world?
It'll always depend on players. And I think if you were a young boy or girl now, you're probably seeing as, I want to play in goal because of so much involvement in the game. And ultimately, it's players and their skill set will define what contribution and what role they have. And you only have to look at going back to our compromise game with Australia. Like, they straight away realised that they could have an outfield player in goal because of the value they could add to the game. And that's the beauty of all sports. There's no right or wrong. It's about trying to come up with that competitive edge that either a team hasn't thought of or will struggle to kind of counteract. And whether that means we will have fly goalkeepers or last man back, I'm not sure. But certainly I do admire, and I'd love to see the development of this, to see if teams can really come up with a defined role for a goalkeeper in all aspects of play. And then on the other side, will we see teams that can actually counteract it if a goalkeeper does take too many liberties?
Yeah, there is a bravery about it. One last one before you both go. The Dubs 2022, Mal, continue to be the story in many ways of the league thus far. What are you seeing here, and what are you expecting from them over the course of the next couple of months based on what you've seen so far?
Yeah, they're absolutely fascinating. I think I actually wrote a piece about them last week. I think there's a lot being made out of it being a transition period. And I'm not sure it is as much. I think it is a transition period, but I think the big transition they're making is in their style of play more so than their personnel. I think they're trying to kick the ball an awful lot more. I think they're trying to kick the ball into attack an awful lot more. It isn't clicking for numerous reasons. They lost Cormac Costello very early on. Paddy Small hasn't played yet. Conor Callahan hasn't played yet. There's a reasonable chance that could be their full forward line come the summer. They're also trying to change styles this week is quite nice, but up until now the weather has been absolutely atrocious, so that's not easy either. So I wouldn't panic for them particularly. I think they've obviously come back into the pack, and I think their aura has fallen away, which is a huge factor. I think everybody fancies having a cut off them now. But I was thinking about this week, even after they lost to Kildare. Count your Final Four in July. Do you think they're not in it? Their ceiling is or their floor is higher than most teams' ceiling, So are they going to really lose an All-Ireland quarter-final? Maybe if they drew one of the sticky Ulster teams, but I can't really see it. So they're gonna be there in an All-Ireland semi-final. At that stage, I think it'll be any one of four teams can win it, rather than in other years, if Dublin are in the last four, they're going to win it. So I don't think it's panic stations yet. I think their aura is gone, which is a huge thing. And I think they're changing their style. But they can coach that in, and they're still going to be okay through Leinster. Okay, maybe Kildare in a Leinster final, who knows? But like, I do think that as I say, their floor is higher than most teams' ceilings. So I wouldn't cry too many rivers for them just yet.
No. Listen, I know you've to run Malachy Clerkin of the Irish Times, so thanks very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Cheers. Jason, I guess broad question to you. I appreciate you're predominantly on here to talk about the goalkeeping conversation. It's probably tricky to be anyway critical of players that you're very close with. Maybe a broad question is, when you're watching them across these 4 games, what are the issues you think that they'll be focusing on rectifying over the next couple of weeks?
I suppose that's the interesting part, Joe. And again, like most people, I only have a snapshot into what I see, and it's obviously been a challenging time for them. And I suppose I'm curious to see how they'll respond, and how they will figure out a way to perform. Because as you say, I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of the players in there, and I know the type of guys they are and the character that they have. And you can be sure they'll be exhausting every energy to figure out how they can improve performances. So again, like, we were very lucky in the time that we were involved to have that success on the pitch. I suppose it was inevitable in our opinions that it wasn't going to last forever. And luckily for the majority of those guys, they achieved a lot of success with very little defeats in that time. So this is a totally new ball game for them, and it'll be really interesting to see how they respond to it. So it seems that the league has a lot more importance this year, obviously with the timeline, so they don't have too long to kind of figure things out, but that's the challenge that they have now. So it'll create interesting viewing over the 3 remaining league games and then moving into the championship.
And do you agree that you see them trying to change a style? Do you see them kicking more, kicking less? Like, what stands out to you about what they're trying to do? If you could give us a specific or two in so much as you're comfortable doing.
No, I obviously I look at performance and I try. I suppose part of me, when we moved, I knew what we did in 2019 wouldn't be good enough. That we need to move on, and it needs to improve. And I think there's definitely been a journey to see what that identity is and what it looks like. And to be fair, it can be a hard time when you're in National League football in bad conditions, when 2 points are at stake. If it doesn't go your way, people kind of can kind of get too kind of caught up in, are we a kicking team, or are we a possession team and stuff like that. It's very hard to make that kind of decision at this time of year. Really what Dublin have proved over the last number of years is they've smart footballers, they've good footballers that understand the situation that presents themselves. And I suppose there's been glimpses of dealing with situations, but with the ball and without the ball over the last weeks that looked really well. There have been other times that they've been challenged with that, and ultimately, as a Dublin supporter, I hope that they figure out a way of performing with and without the ball that's probably at a level and at better standards that they've demonstrated so far in this league.
Yeah, well, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. Listen, Jason Sherlock, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks again to Jason Sherlock and to Malachy Clerkin, our Gaelic football coverage here on Off the Ball, brought to you with thanks to AIB.